Hey, what's cracking everyone? My name is Ryan, and today I have a new headphone to talk to you guys about that's currently under embargo, and that is a new Fostex from the T series, and this is the T60RP Mark II. Because anybody that looks at this is gonna you're gonna automatically think that this is a T60 Mark I because it looks just like the T60 Mark I outside of the wood on the headphone itself. Everything is pretty much identical from both headphones, but there is one difference right away that you will see there on the bottom that focuses in, and that is the dual cable connections to the cups, which I'll talk about here in a second. Now, I do want to send a big thank you out to Jackrabbit Media because they actually sent this out to me a few weeks ago so I could check it out to get it ready for this video. I don't have any technical specifications on this headphone as of yet, so that is going to be posted after the fact. I will put that in the description of the video once I have that. So I'm not going to be able to tell you any driver specifications or anything. I'm also not going to be able to tell you exactly what you get inside the box. I can only comment on what I received from the box that I have here. And that is a second set of pads, an unbalanced cable, a balanced cable, and a Fostex bag to put the headphone in. I got to say right away, these are wood cups. I really wish this was a clamshell case instead of a flowy bag, but it is what it is. I'm pretty sure the originals came in a bag like that as well. The balance cable is the other thing I'm not 100% sure if you're going to get that, simply because this was the case that I got the cable in the box, and I'm sure that's not going to be the final version written balanced on there, but I do appreciate that being sent over so I could get a listening with both types of cables, and I really hope the balanced is included. These are both rubbery type cables, by the way. That is the balanced one there. This is the 3.5 here that has the 6.3 adapter already screwed on, but they do roll up and lay nice and flat on the table. The pads that are on here are leather pads, and then the alternate pads that I have here are velour. And again, I'm going to assume that you're going to get velour pads in the box of the headphone when you purchase it as well. Really quick, as we take a look at this headphone, I'm just gonna switch over here to my creeper cam, and guys, this is my latest Grumpy Goose from Mr. Chris O'Neill. He makes fantastic headphone stands. They are exquisite in their design. This is a purple heart, and it completes for now my collection of 3 Grumpy Goose stands, and I think this looks amazing. So I just had to give him a shout out because he well deserves it. Check him out. I will link this stand and his page in the comments down below or in the description. Let's talk about the aesthetics, because sitting right in front of me, I could definitely do that and tell you that yes, it looks identical to the Mark I. The wood on here is different. The Mark I, I believe, was mahogany. Now this one, I can only assume is going to be different because it looks different. It's got almost like an ebony type feel to it, but this could also be a walnut, like an ebony walnut, something like that, black walnut, I should say, something like that, because it reminds me a little bit of the 99 Classics from Meze, but I'm not 100% sure. Now, I don't know the price of this headphone as of yet. Again, I will put that in the description, but I gotta imagine it's gonna be between that $300 to $400 range based off of the original. I do know it's a planar magnetic headphone, just like the original. All right, that out of the way, let's just dive right into the build and everything of this. So again, just like the Mark I. Now the Mark I did not have any time with outside of CanJam, so please don't ask me for direct sonic differences between these two, because I just honestly don't have that sound signature memorized in my head from the Mark I. I do have the look of the Mark I memorized enough that this is definitely identical. Now, I don't know on materials if it's identical. I can tell you that the pad up top here does feel like artificial leather. I don't think it's actually full-blown leather, but we're gonna take a look there. The strap underneath is very stiff, and this is like almost a rubbery bounce to it, if you can see that there, of how that is. And it's thick, but I can tell you the good news is I do think it's pretty comfortable. So I didn't have any issues with that. The adjustment on here is just like the other Fostex headphones. It's very smooth, I gotta say. And just overall, from a machining standpoint and from a build quality standpoint, everything is very smooth and just feels like a solid build in the hand. So I am impressed enough with that. There is really not much in the way to speak of when it comes to cup tilt, and there is no cup swivel unless you want to call this tiny little bit cup swivel, I suppose you could. I will tell you that if this is on the lowest adjustment, so if you're somebody with a really small head, what I don't like right off the bat is that these do hit on the inside of the band. Now I gotta imagine that's a really small head, so most people probably aren't gonna be there, but even if you adjust just slightly, you could be hitting the bottom of that. Hopefully not. Me, I had no problem because I'm well above that, and the swivel or the tilt doesn't hit anywhere on there, so that part is nice. Now the other thing with these is that the pads that are on here are artificial leather pads, and they do come on and off really easy. You know, anybody that's familiar with the Mark I, because, you know, you can pad swap those like crazy. These are gonna be easily pad swapped as well. And I didn't really have any issues getting this artificial leather pad on and off, but I had major problems with this one. And I'll talk about that here in a second. Comfort-wise, I gotta say, because this is solid all the way around with the pads, it is very comfortable. My ears do touch on the inside of this headphone ever so slightly, and I do think these are going to get warm in the summer months just because this is like a semi-closed back headphone or semi-open, whether you like glass half empty or glass half full, you know what I mean there. But yes, I mean, my ears do get a little bit warm even as it stands right now. Now you would think it'd be warmer in April, but it hasn't been here in the Midwest. I gotta say, this is an extremely comfortable headphone. I've had no issues with that. And I think the weight's somewhere around the upper 390 to 400 grams of weight. Again, when I get that specification, I'll drop that in the description. Now let me go on to what I was talking about with my annoyance with this headphone. That's these pads. These are velour pads that are meant to be swapped with this headphone. I have absolutely no sonic impression of the velour pads at all. I was sent a measurement of the velour pads so I can at least talk about the measurement of that, but actually listening to them, no. And it is because I could not get these on the headphone to save my life. And guys, I've listened to quite a few different headphones. I've pad swapped a lot of different headphones. I pad swapped ZMFs, things that were very difficult. I spent a good probably 20, 30 minutes cursing and about ready to throw these against the wall, and I could not get them on here, which makes me come to one of two conclusions. Either one, this is possibly not the right pad for this headphone, which is I'm hoping that is the case, because it's possible maybe this was just sent along and it was meant for one of the other Fostex headphones. Or two, they've got a problem here that they need to fix ASAP, and I am going to show you what the problem is here just in a second. So I've got the artificial leather pad and I've got the velour pad. As you can see here, these look identical, right? Now, when you flip them over to the back, however, I do think there's a little bit of a difference, and it's really kind of hard to pick out, but they do look a little bit different there as far as the shape of them goes. But the problem is with this lip. On the leather, which I know it's going to be hard for this camera to pick up, this lip actually is a little bit longer and has more pull to it. The lip on this one here has no pull to it at all. I mean, that's it right there. And that is why I cannot get this one around the headphone to save my life. And like I said, I have tried so many times, so different ways. I've tried flipping it inside out like a ZMF pad. I cannot get this on the headphone. So again, I am hoping it's just a mistake. But if it's not, Fostex, you got to fix this right away. But if I'm wrong, you can just tell me I'm wrong and we're going to just move on. So speaking of the pad swapping issue that I have, I would like to know in the comments down below if you've had issues with a Fostex in the past for pad swapping. Is this something that's just unique to me? Am I just an idiot? I mean, yeah, you guys have been kind of harsh sometimes. So let me know in the comments down below. But yeah, not good. That's all I'm gonna say on the velour pads, guys. I got no sound impressions to talk about. We're gonna stick to the leather for this video. Okay, one more odd thing I should mention is that this is the left cup, this is the right cup, this is how it goes in my head. I am so used to the brand being facing towards me, or the brand name, as you can see. Now in the camera that looks right because that says Fostex to you, right? But that really should be flipped upside down in my opinion, because when I put it on my head, it's facing the other way. So I don't know, that's a little strange to me. I'm not used to seeing that. And again, could just be because this is a pre-production model. I'm not quite sure, but if that's the way it is, that's a little weird. The other nice thing is that this is dual 3.5 connections to the cups. So you have dual mono 3.5 connections here. I know the original version was only one connection, so I am glad to see that they updated that so that you can have many different cables for a universal fit for this headphone, that is definitely a welcome update to the Mark II. All right, now as far as sources and pairings and things like that go, guys, I have tried all different things with this. My iBasso DC Elite that I've got sitting here, and my iBasso Nunchaku that I will have a review out here very, very soon. I use my Schiit Modius and Midgard stack. That was honestly probably most of my listening with this headphone because, quite honestly, even though I did listen to it on the V281, I don't see a lot of people buying a headphone in this price range and pairing it up with something like 10 times the price of it. So maybe not that much, but you get what I'm saying. So I tried to stick to something more reasonable. And when I did pair it up to something more simple, it did need a little bit more power to get it going. For instance, on the Midgard, with the balance connection, it actually needed about 11 to 12 on the volume pot, which is fine. I mean, I don't have any problem doing that. That did tell me that, you know, when you're pairing this up to something that hardly has any power at all, you may need just a little bit more, or may need to at least flip it to high gain. For instance, on the Nunchaku, I actually liked using high gain more because I was having the volume on this up to about 85 sometimes. Not that that's a bad thing, just a preference thing. So I do recommend an amp. One other note really quick, guys, is on isolation. So since this is semi-open, semi-closed back headphone, it doesn't deaden out the outside noise, but it also doesn't broadcast what you're playing really clearly either. So it is that in between. That's kind of what that means when they say semi-open, semi-closed. So just don't expect to have any kind of a noise canceling type effect from wearing this headphone, because that's just not going to happen. You're going to be able to hear things around you. All right, so on to sound impressions. This has been interesting. I find the sound of this headphone to be a bit strange, to be perfectly honest. I'll start with the low end and tell you that depending on the source that you have, the low end of this headphone is decent. There's elevation for sure. And it's in that mid bass to probably lower mid bass region because there's rolling off into the sub bass, but it's not a dramatic roll off like I have heard the previous versions be, at least from what people have told me and what I've heard about the Mark I. Because it has such of a big elevation in that mid bass, it does get some boominess to it. It definitely has some rumble to it, but I don't find it to be the most controlled in the bass response. And it's not always easy to pick out. You know, sometimes it sounds fantastic and it's fun and engaging. And then other times I'm just like, that sounds bad. For instance, just a quick track example I'll throw at you is Big Hammer by James Blake. At the very beginning has that rumbling bass response through it, and it just kind of sounds like a wet fart. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. It's just kind of like that, but elevated to where I'm just like, yeah, that didn't sound good. So then I, you know, kind of moved on to something else. But then with some electronic type music and things, the bass, it slams, which is fantastic, and it can have good sustain to it and rumble. And like I said, that can be a lot of fun and engaging depending on the track. And when I talk about the source, what I'm saying there is on something like the Nunchaku, I'm finding this actually almost provided a little bit too much because it's a little bit fluid with the tube that's inside of this. And it's not an overly tubey sound out of this, but I didn't really like the pairing as much because sometimes it made that bass go even more out of control than what it should. But on something like my Midgard, it was fine, it was taut. But my DC Elite actually was my favorite thing to pair up with this headphone, and was what I listened to probably more so than anything else, because this just has the best control of the driver. You know, the DC Elite is just a solid pairing with this headphone. Now, as we go into the mid-range though, that's where things get wonky. There's definitely a scoop out in the mid-range, and when the measurements were sent to me, it verified that. In the like lower to middle part of the mid-range, it's not the entire thing, which is strange because sometimes I don't notice it at all and this headphone sounds great, but then other times I just feel like something's missing from an artist. Now, one thing I can tell you in general is that I do like vocals on this headphone because there's good vocal presence. Bree listened to them and she's like, oh, I think they sound pretty good on her singer-songwriter stuff. I could see that. But some vocalists just don't have a lot of breath to them. And that's actually something I wrote down. I was listening to some Norah Jones tracks and her voice just didn't fill up a room quite as much, even though it had good presence. Drums kind of does the same things. Like I said, kick drums are amazing. Some snares, not so amazing. Guitars, I was listening to a lot of metal and rock and roll tracks, and I could stand it with this headphone. But again, there was times where I was just like, man, where's that guitar that I want to hear? Down with the Sickness by Disturbed. You know, that riff that goes on in that track is just kind of overtaken by the vocals and overtaken by some drums and things. And I'm like, that didn't sound right. Some Rage Against the Machine, the guitars, you know, the iconic guitar in there doesn't sound quite right. And I talked about as it goes into the upper mid range, we get a little bit more. So I pick up some attack. There's some decent punchiness to this headphone. This does not sound like a typical planar in my opinion, but I think that's kind of what the previous versions were like as well from what I've picked up. So at some points it was fun. And then at some points I was just wondering, what am I listening to? All right, so then going into the treble region of this, and there is some good energy. There is some sparkle up there in the treble. I do pick up some hissiness at times on some vocals on the S and Ts. Some cymbals have a little bit of extra going on. I don't find a metallic nature coming out of this. Some planars can sound just unnatural in that upper treble, and I don't really pick that up. I think they have made this a little bit warmer of a response, but we get a lot more as we get into that brilliance region, because I definitely pick up some airiness and some depth and some width. And I don't think this is necessarily a huge stage, but it gives you a out of head type of experience that where you can, you know, feel that when you're listening to certain live performances and things like that. So, and then when we get into that presence region of the treble, again, you know, vocalists have good presence to them. It's that airiness that I'm talking about from their breath with that lower mid-range that doesn't quite have that filler sometimes. Now, I do think this headphone pairs well with a lot of hip hop music, just as long as you don't have something that's too overly rumbly or a source that's gonna get that bass out of control, because then it's not gonna be so flattering. And I also think electronic music, as I said, I would think gaming and movies would be a lot of fun on this headphone, just because you're gonna get at least enough of the vocals and things. Some competitive games, no, I would not do that. I did, you know, and that's something I should have mentioned in the bass response, is that there were times where it muddied up the mid-range a little bit just because it was scooped out so much. It kind of overtook that part of it. So that wasn't quite as impressive. My overall thoughts on this headphone are a little bit incomplete. I need to see exactly if this package is correct, first of all, because if there is a problem with this pad, that's a major problem for people. And I don't think it's going to be just me, but hopefully I'm wrong and that's fixed. The other thing is, I like the included balanced cable with this. I think that's fantastic. I think the build quality, comfort, all of that is good with this headphone. I think the sound's a little strange in my opinion. And when you have things like the Meze 105 Air that I love, that I think is fantastic, this is definitely different from something like that. It's a departure, but I know these headphones, a lot of people like to mod and things. So I don't know. Fostex hasn't done a lot that's really impressed me lately. This one's just kind of a meh for me, but that's not to say there weren't moments that I had with this headphone that I enjoyed it, because I'd be lying. And yeah, I had moments that I enjoyed, but overall, there's other things in this price range that I would take. So we're gonna see where this goes after this headphone launches and the price point comes out and all the included accessories, and hopefully we'll see some other opinions on this. But guys, that's all I got from now. I want to thank each and every one of you for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Drop a comment down below if you've owned the Mark I version, if this is something that intrigues you or not, because I would like to know. All right, guys, I will see you in the next one.